Hello, my name's Ethan. Make sure to check my website, ethanwrenn.com, for there you can find links to all my various socials. I'm continually posting on Twitch, YouTube, Reddit, Discord, Twitter, wherever it is you like to consume your media. Make sure to follow if you'd like to get notified when we go live next or whenever I'm talking about new potential products that I see value in. On my website, I have a blog. If you go to ethanwrenn.com, click the blog button at the top right corner. Here's an example of what one of the blog posts may look like. As you can see, there's more in-depth information about a lot of the products we cover here on this channel, including the top holdings of a particular ETF. Every post also has its own unique video that coincides with it. And at the very bottom, you're even able to leave a comment. Let me know what you think, how I could potentially improve. I'd really appreciate any feedback. At the bottom right corner of every page, there's a Discord widget. If you click it, you basically are able to gain access to my Discord. You do not need to make an account to view this. You do not need to log in. It's all just available and you can scroll through. If you see something you find interesting, you could click it. Click the open original button and then you can get a more in-depth, it'll pull it up in another tab so you can more clearly read what the picture may contain. What's the next thing we are going to be covering? We're going to be covering copper futures, COMEX, denominated in the US dollar. So when it comes to futures, right, it's maybe a little bit more advanced of a topic. I plan on in a future stream to be covering futures and their nuances and intricacies in a more detail. So if that's something you find interesting, definitely subscribe to the YouTube channel and you will know when that goes live. But for today, we're going to be covering copper futures. Copper does not have a fund or exchange traded fund-esque derivative that allows you to easily gain access to it via like something such as GLD or SLV, which are gold and silver derivatives that you can freely trade as if it was the S&P, right? You might be very familiar with it. So copper futures, as you can see, we have this nice upward trending price channel. What are some of the things that I see value in when it comes to copper futures? Well, at the bottom, you would see the RSI. This is an indicator we cover on every potential product we look at here on this channel. You know, consistency is key. You're always seeing me use a 180 moving average. You always see me use a 20 moving average. You're always seeing me use the RSI. Again, this is the weekly chart. If you come up here next to the futures and there's a W here, that means every candle here represents 1 week of time. So as you can see here, when the RSI is low, this is typically a sign that it's oversold or potentially a good value. When the RSI is high in the sky, this is potentially a sign that the asset's overvalued or it's not a good time to be allocating to that particular asset. Let's just look at some prior examples where the RSI was as low as it is currently. As you can see here in March 2020, the RSI came down, touched the 30. And between March, April, May, June, and July, so roughly 4 months-ish, it took for the RSI to come from all the way from the bottom back up to the top on the weekly. But then what happened after that? It proceeded to stay at the top and continue to grow for an additional 600 days, guys. 600 days. Clearly, this chart's growing more often than it's not growing. A time prior to that would be January 2016, where the RSI came down, touched the 30, then proceeded to run for what was roughly 6 months before it peaked out, touching the top end of the RSI. But then it proceeded to stay again at the top end of the RSI for an additional 385 days, providing a gain of 56%. So these are pretty big ranges when you're looking at an asset such as this. Again, these are futures, and it's representing a metal, which is a commodity, right? So 131%, 56%, these are all very, very solid. Now, every time when the RSI comes down and touches that 30, you start to see a correlation with this weekly 180 moving average. This is something we see on basically all companies or all symbols, this very common trend that we see here. And that weekly 180 moving average can act as a support. Now, another thing to note, we have our forward curve here, which is currently projecting an increase in price to 386. which is about 6%. And again, forward curves tend to continue to grow as they get confirmed, right? So when the chart appreciates, the projected return by the forward curve will also appreciate, but it's typically a good sign when the forward curve is pointing to future gains. Right now we are looking at the USD denominated chart. Let me pull up the MCX denominated charts because we sometimes look at those when we are covering futures. Same percent scale. And as you can see, they are very similar as you would expect, right? With potentially the INR. Again, this is MCX, so the orange line is copper futures, but denominated in INR. Let's go to a little bit closer of a time frame. So right at the bottom of that 2022, as you can see, they tend to perform extremely similarly. When one's rising, they're both rising. Of course, when one's selling off, they're both selling off. Any subtle differentials in value would solely be caused by the fluctuations of the underlying currencies that these futures are denominated in. So when you're seeing a differential here, it's caused when the currency that this futures contract is denominated in is appreciating relative to another currency or depreciating relative to another currency. But when one of these contracts are rising, they're both rising. And I just wanted to show both of them because I think it's important to consider both of these potential charts when you are trading futures. Great. We are currently projecting a gain of as much as 77.6% in copper futures, which would bring copper futures up to a price point of $6.46. This makes sense when you compare it to the aluminum futures that we just covered. Again, if you're watching on YouTube, I'm going to have a bunch of metals videos coming out, so make sure to stay tuned and subscribe over on YouTube. So you'll be able to compare these potential base metals against each other, and you'll see that a lot of these underlying base metals, when I say base metals, this refers to metals such as aluminum, copper, and zinc. Some of the maybe lesser talked about metals, but just as potentially lucrative metals. They're all presenting this great entry with the RSIs being oversold, bouncing off that weekly 180 moving average. So they kind of act as a supporting detail to a bullish case for each other. When copper's potentially about to bounce and run, you would potentially see that as added value for these other metals such as aluminum to be bouncing and running. I believe that's everything I want to say about copper futures. Stay tuned.